This is a story about two souls finding each other in the most unexpected way, about the power of written words to bridge impossible distances, and about what happens when love blooms from the shadows of deception. Welcome back, beautiful souls and story lovers. Tonight, we bring you a tale where love is tested, secrets come to light, and fate takes an unexpected turn. Every moment will pull you in deeper, and every choice could change everything. Tell us where you're watching from in the comments. And if this story touches your heart, subscribe, share it with someone who believes in true love, and hit the bell so you never miss the next chapter. The screech of subway brakes pierced the morning air as Vincent Kane descended into the underground maze of New York's transit system. The smell of coffee, exhaust, and human sweat mingled in the stale air. At 35, he hadn't taken public transportation in over a decade, but today's traffic had forced his hand. His driver's shocked expression still lingered in his memory. Vincent Kane, tech billionaire worth more than most small countries' GDP, riding the subway like a common commuter. The irony wasn't lost on him. The subway car lurched forward and Vincent gripped the metal pole. His expensive Italian leather shoes felt foreign against the scuffed floor. Around him, people pressed together in forced intimacy, their faces buried in phones, books, or vacant stares. That's when he saw it. Small brown diary, worn soft from years of handling, wedged between two seats. Its leather cover bore the scars of daily use, edges frayed like old friendship. Vincent glanced around the car. No one seemed to be searching for anything. The businessman beside him typed furiously on his phone. A woman across the aisle slept. Against the window, Vincent picked up the diary, telling himself he'd turn it in at the next station. But as he opened the cover to look for identification, elegant handwriting caught his eye. Art is the language of the soul, and I'm still learning how to speak. Something twisted in his chest. He'd built an empire on algorithms and virtual reality, but when had he last touched anything real? Anything that mattered beyond profit margins? His fingers turned the page against his better judgment. Another rejection today. Mr. Hartwell says my contemporary exhibition proposal lacks commercial viability. He doesn't understand that art isn't supposed to be safe. It's supposed to wake people up, make them feel something they've forgotten how to feel. I wanted to scream at him that not everything needs to generate revenue to have value. But I just nodded and said I'd revise it again. Tightened. The raw honesty in those words hit him like a physical blow. When had he last felt passion like this? When had anything mattered to him beyond market dominance and shareholder meetings? He read about Emma's small apartment in Queens, how she ate simple meals to afford art books, about watching couples in museum galleries and wondering if she'd ever find someone who understood her dedication to making art accessible to everyone. Not dot 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 about watching couples in about watching couples in museum galleries and wondering about what is it road? I'm so in dut. We're wild. Really. Rewat. Or ruined. Tumwers. While we're parar. Or we're I wanna rye. A pubin on. We're word in the so ride. I'm all run when all are upset art are sen all red are I sanjer it I wake her would. The train announced his stop, but Vincent didn't move. He was lost in the world of this stranger. This Emma Rodriguez who worked at the Metropolitan Museum and dreamed of exhibitions that would change people's lives. Sometimes I feel invisible. In meetings, on the street, in my own life. I wonder if I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone notice? Would anyone care that I tried to bring beauty into the world? Vincent's hands trembled as he closed the diary. This woman poured her soul onto paper, and now he held her most intimate thoughts. He should stop reading, should turn it in immediately. But as the subway doors opened and he stepped onto the platform, the diary remained clutched in his hand. For the first time in years, Vincent Kane felt something other than the cold satisfaction of another deal closed. He felt alive. 3 weeks passed before Vincent admitted to himself what he'd become, a stalker. Not in the traditional sense. He hadn't followed Emma Rodriguez through the streets or shown up at her workplace uninvited. Instead, he'd done something far more intimate and infinitely more dangerous. He'd fallen in love with her mind. Every evening in his penthouse office, Manhattan sparkling 40 floors below, Vincent opened Emma's diary and lost himself in her world. He'd memorized her handwriting, the way she pressed harder when she was angry, how her letters grew smaller when she felt vulnerable. Saw the most beautiful painting today in storage. A piece by Maria Santos, an artist who died unknown and penniless. Her work captures loneliness so perfectly it made me cry in the basement archives. I want to give her a retrospective, but they'll never approve it. Dead artists don't generate buzz unless they're already famous. Vincent closed his eyes, Emma's words echoing in his mind. He'd hosted charity galas at the Met, written checks that covered entire wing renovations. But he'd never truly seen the art. It was all tax deductions and networking opportunities. His phone buzzed. Robert Mills, his assistant, with another acquisition opportunity. Vincent ignored it. Instead, he opened his laptop and began researching Maria Santos. Within hours, using resources Emma could never access, he tracked down her remaining works scattered across private collections and forgotten storage units. It should have stopped there. But Vincent's obsession had grown beyond reading. He'd started responding to Emma's entries in his own journal, writing letters she'd never receive. Emma wrote, "I gave my presentation today about accessible art programs. They stared at me like I was speaking a foreign language. Sometimes I wonder if I'm delusional, thinking art can change people's lives." Vincent wrote, "You're not delusional. You're the first person in years who's reminded me why beauty matters. Your passion is like fire, and I've been living in ice. For so long, I'd forgotten what warmth felt like." The irony cut deep. He could fund every exhibition Emma dreamed of with pocket change. He could make her invisible problems disappear with a phone call. But he was trapped behind the anonymity of her stolen diary, a ghost in her life. Vincent's conscience whispered that he should return the diary, confess what he'd done. Could he explain that this woman's private thoughts had become his salvation? That her words had cracked something open in him that he'd sealed shut years ago? On Thursday evening, Emma wrote about her loneliness with such raw honesty that Vincent poured himself 3 fingers of scotch and sat staring at the city lights until dawn. "I went on a date tonight. Tom, from accounting. Nice enough guy. But when I tried to explain why I love Rothko's color-field paintings, his eyes glazed over. He asked if I knew any normal women he could date. I laughed it off, but it stung. Maybe I am too much. Maybe my passion for art makes me unlovable." Vincent's glass shattered against his office wall. Emma Rodriguez wasn't too much. She was everything he'd been missing without knowing it. Her intensity, her dedication, her refusal to compromise her vision for approval or easy money. She was the opposite of every shallow social climber who'd tried to capture his attention. But he was living a lie, building a relationship with someone who didn't know he existed. That night, Vincent made a decision that would change both their lives. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in months. "Hello, Margaret. It's Vincent Kane. I want to discuss a donation to the Met. Something significant." As he spoke, Emma's diary lay open beside him to her latest entry. "I had the strangest dream last night. Someone was reading my words, understanding them completely. For the first time in my life, I felt truly seen. I wish dreams like that could come true." Vincent's hand trembled as he closed the diary. Emma's wish was about to come true in ways she could never imagine, and it would destroy them both. Emma stared at the email on her screen, reading it for the 5th time. Vincent Kane Technologies had just committed $50 million to the Metropolitan Museum. It's one specific request: a contemporary art exhibition featuring unknown and overlooked artists, curated by Emma Rodriguez. Her hands shook as she reached for her coffee. This was impossible. 3 weeks ago, her proposal for exactly this type of exhibition had been rejected. Suddenly, she had unlimited funding and full creative control. "Emma, Dr. Margaret." Hartwell burst into her cramped office, her usually composed demeanor cracking with excitement. "Do you understand what this means? Vincent Kane specifically requested you. He's never shown interest in contemporary art before, but somehow he knows your work." Emma's stomach lurched. "He requested me? By name? Apparently, he's been following your proposal about accessible art programming." He wants to meet with you tomorrow to discuss the exhibition's direction. The world tilted sideways. Emma gripped her desk, trying to steady herself. How could Vincent Kane know about her work? She was nobody, invisible in the grand scheme of the art world. Her proposals gathered dust on supervisors' desks, her ideas dismissed as commercially unviable. That evening, Emma sat in her small Queens apartment staring at her diary's empty space in her bag. She'd lost it weeks ago, and with it, years of thoughts, dreams, and plans. The timing felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. Just as her career was taking an impossible turn, her most private possession had vanished. She opened a new notebook and tried to write, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself thinking about eyes. In her dreams lately, someone had been watching her, understanding her. The dreams felt so real she'd wake up feeling less alone. The next afternoon, Emma stood outside the glass towers of Kane Technologies. Her portfolio clutched against her chest like armor. She'd worn her best suit, a navy blue piece she'd splurged on for job interviews, and her grandmother's pearl earrings. For luck, the elevator ride to the 40th floor felt eternal. When the doors opened, she stepped into a world of marble and steel, where everything gleamed with money and power. The receptionist, perfectly manicured and wearing more than Emma made in 6 months, directed her to the conference room. Emma pushed open the heavy glass door and froze. Vincent Kane stood with his back to her, silhouetted against floor-to-ceiling, windows that framed Manhattan like a living painting. He was taller than she'd expected, broader through the shoulders. His dark hair was slightly mussed, as if he'd been running his hands through it. Miss Rodriguez. His voice was deeper than she'd imagined, with an edge that suggested carefully, controlled intensity. When he turned around, Emma's breath caught. His eyes were the color of storm clouds, gray-blue and turbulent. But it wasn't their color that stopped her cold. It was the recognition she saw there. The way he looked at her, not through her or past her, but directly into her, as if he could see straight to her soul. Mr. Kane. She extended her hand, professional and composed, despite the chaos in her chest. When their fingers touched, Vincent's composure cracked for just a moment. His grip lingered a heartbeat too long, and something passed between them that made Emma's skin tingle. Please sit. He gestured to a chair across from his, but remained standing. I've been looking forward to this conversation. I have to ask, Emma said, settling into her chair and opening her portfolio. How did you know about my work? My proposals have barely left the Met's internal review process. Vincent moved to the windows, his jaw tightening. I believe in supporting visionary thinking, especially when that vision aligns with necessary change in how we present art to the public. It was a politician's answer, Emma realized. Smooth and meaningless. But when he turned back to face her, his eyes held something raw and hungry. Tell me about Maria Santos, he said quietly. Emma's portfolio slipped from her hands, papers scattering across the polished table. How do you know about Maria Santos? Make it my business to know about overlooked talent. Vincent's voice was careful, controlled. I understand you want to feature her work in your exhibition. She died penniless and unknown, Emma whispered, her mind racing. Maria Santos wasn't in any of her official proposals. The only place she'd written about the forgotten artist was... The room went silent except for the distant hum of traffic 40 floors below. Emma stared at Vincent Kane, pieces clicking together with horrible clarity. The timing of his donation, his knowledge of her private thoughts, the way he looked at her like he already knew her. You have my diary, she said. Vincent's face went white. For a moment, the billionaire facade crumbled completely, revealing something vulnerable and desperate underneath. Emma, I can explain. You've been reading my diary? Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the air like a blade. Vincent took a step toward her, his hands raised as if approaching a wounded animal. It's not what you think. Emma stood, her chair scraping against the marble floor. Every intimate thought she'd committed to paper, every private fear and hope. In dream, this stranger had consumed them all. The violation felt physical, like invisible hands had been touching her for weeks. 3 weeks, she said, her voice growing stronger. You've had it for 3 weeks, and instead of returning it, you've been living inside my head. I tried to stop reading. Vincent said desperately. But your words, Emma, they saved me. Been dead inside for years, and your passion brought me back to life. Emma's laugh was bitter. So you decided to play God with my career? Fund my dreams with guilt money? No, it's not like that. Vincent moved closer, his eyes blazing. Everything I'm offering is because you deserve it. Your vision, your talent, it should be supported regardless of how I discovered it. But that's not how you discovered it, is it? Emma's hands clenched into fists. You discovered it by stealing the most private part of me. The accusation hung between them like a wall. Vincent's shoulders sagged as if the weight of what he'd done finally hit him fully. I know how this looks, he said quietly. I know what I am. But Emma, what I felt reading your words, what I feel looking at you now, it's the most real thing I've experienced in years. Emma backed toward the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. This man had been living in her head for weeks, had funded her dreams based on stolen knowledge, and somehow she could still feel the pull between them. The connection she'd sensed the moment she walked in was real, electric, and completely poisoned. By his betrayal? Keep your money, Mr. Kane, she said, her hand on the door handle, and stay away from me. As she turned to leave, Vincent's voice stopped her. I love you. Emma's hand froze on the handle. 3 words that should have made her heart soar instead felt like another violation. How could he love someone whose most private thoughts he'd stolen? No, she whispered without turning around. You love the woman in those pages. You don't know me at all. She walked out, leaving Vincent standing alone in his glass tower, surrounded by money and power that meant nothing without her. Emma didn't go home that night. Instead, she walked the streets of Manhattan until her feet bled in her professional heels, her mind spinning with the weight of Vincent's betrayal and her body's treacherous response to his presence. By dawn, she found herself standing outside the Metropolitan Museum, staring at the limestone facade that had been her sanctuary for years. Everything felt different now. Her career, her dreams, even her private thoughts had been contaminated by Vincent. Kane's money and obsession. She called in sick and spent the day in Central Park, trying to write in her new journal. But every word felt exposed, as if invisible eyes were still watching. Vincent had stolen more than her diary. He'd stolen her ability to be honest with herself on paper. That evening, Emma's phone rang. Dr. Hartwell's name flashed on the screen. Emma, thank God. Where are you? Vincent Kane has been calling all day. Apparently your meeting didn't go well. I'm not taking his money. Emma's voice was hoarse from crying. What? Emma, you can't be serious. This is a $50 million opportunity. Do you understand what you're throwing away? Emma closed her eyes. How could she explain that Vincent's offer felt like prostitution of her soul? That everything she'd ever dreamed of achieving now tasted like ash because it was built on stolen intimacy? I'm serious, Margaret. Find another curator. She hung up and turned off her phone. Meanwhile, in his penthouse office, Vincent stood at the windows, watching the city blur through rain. Emma's diary lay open on his desk to the last. Entries she'd written before losing it. I had coffee with Mrs. Chen today, the museum's night security guard. She told me she never went to college, never learned about art history. But she stays late sometimes, just to walk through the galleries. The paintings keep me company, she said. That's what I want to create, not just exhibitions for people who already understand art, but spaces where Mrs. Chen feels welcome, where beauty belongs to everyone. Maybe I'm naive, but I believe art can heal loneliness. I should know. Vincent's throat tightened. He'd built an empire, commanded respect from world leaders, but he'd never created anything that could heal loneliness. Emma's vision was worth more than everything he owned. His phone buzzed with another message from Robert. The board was asking questions about the Met donation, especially after Dr. Hartwell called to say the curator had backed out. Vincent ignored it. He'd been ignoring his company for days, letting deals slide and meetings run without him. Nothing mattered except finding a way to undo the damage he'd done. That's when he remembered something Emma had written about Marcus Webb, a former colleague who'd tried to sabotage her career by claiming her ideas as his own. She'd mentioned Webb had recently moved to a private gallery uptown, one that specialized in contemporary work. Vincent grabbed his coat. An hour later, he sat across from Marcus Webb in an expensive Soho restaurant. Webb was everything Vincent expected: smooth, ambitious, and utterly without conscience. Emma Rodriguez? Webb laughed, twirling pasta around his fork. That little mouse? What could you possibly want with her? I want you to offer her a job, Vincent said simply. Head curator, full creative control, budget for 3 major exhibitions per year. Webb nearly choked on his wine. Are you insane? She's a nobody. Her ideas are too idealistic, too unmarketable. I'll fund the gallery, Vincent continued, as if Webb hadn't spoken. Anonymous donation. It's $20 million. Renewable, annually contingent. On Emma Rodriguez being given the position in complete artistic freedom? You're serious. Webb's eyes lit up with greed.
That's the catch.
She can never know the money comes from me. Ever. If she finds out, the funding disappears immediately. Webb leaned back in his chair, studying Vincent with calculating eyes. You're in love with her? Vincent's jaw tightened. That's irrelevant. Oh, it's very relevant. What did you do to her? She must hate you pretty thoroughly if you're willing to pay $20 million just to make her dreams come true anonymously. Do we have a deal or not? Webb grinned like a shark scenting blood. We have a deal, but Kane, if this blows. Up in your face, don't come crying to me. 3 days later, Emma sat in her apartment staring at an email that made no sense. Marcus Webb, the man who'd stolen credit for her work 2 years ago, was offering her the head curator position at Meridian Gallery. Full creative control, substantial budget, and the chance to mount the contemporary exhibitions she'd always dreamed of. It felt like another trap. Everything in her life had become suspicious since Vincent Kane's betrayal. But when she called Webb's references, they checked out. The gallery was legitimate, well-funded, and looking to make a name in contemporary art. Emma spent the night walking through her small apartment, weighing her options. Stay at the Met, where her ideas would gather dust, or take a chance with a man she despised, but who was offering her everything she'd ever wanted professionally. By morning, she'd made her decision. Vincent learned about Emma's new position through a brief mention in Art News. The article described her vision for making contemporary art accessible to broader audiences, featuring a quote that made his chest ache. Art shouldn't be a luxury for the wealthy. It should be a conversation between human souls. He closed his laptop and walked to the window. Somewhere across the city, Emma was building the career she deserved. She was creating the exhibitions that would change lives, bringing beauty to people who'd never felt welcome in galleries before. It should have felt like victory. Instead, Vincent felt more alone than ever. That evening, Emma stood in her new office at Meridian Gallery, looking out at the bustling street below. Everything was perfect. Too perfect. In her heart, she knew Vincent Kane's shadow loomed over this opportunity somehow, but she couldn't prove it. What terrified her more than his potential involvement was the part of her that still ached for him. Despite everything, she couldn't forget the recognition in his eyes, the way he'd looked at her like she was the most important person in the world. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your desk drawer. Emma's hands trembled as she opened the bottom drawer. Inside was her diary, wrapped in brown paper with a single note. These belong to you. I'm sorry, Vincent. As she held her stolen thoughts, Emma realized the terrible truth. Vincent Kane had given her everything she'd ever dreamed of professionally. And in doing so, he'd made it impossible for her to be happy, because every success would remind her of him. And, despite the betrayal, despite the violation of her privacy, she was falling in love with a man who'd already destroyed any chance they might have had. 6 months later, Emma stood before the largest crowd she'd ever addressed. The Meridian Gallery buzzed with opening night energy as reporters, collectors, and art lovers gathered for her latest exhibition, Invisible Voices, Art from the Forgotten. Maria Santos's paintings dominated the main wall. Her raw depictions of loneliness transformed into something beautiful and healing. Mrs. Chen from the Met stood in front of them, tears streaming down her face. "These speak to me," she whispered to Emma. "They make me feel less alone." Emma's throat tightened. This was why she'd fallen in love with art in the first place. Not for the prestige or recognition, but for moments like this when beauty bridged the gap between strangers. Emma Rodriguez. A familiar voice made her turn. Vincent Kane stood at the edge of the crowd, wearing a simple black suit instead of his usual armor of expensive tailoring. He looked older, worn down in a way that money couldn't fix. "What are you doing here?" Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. "I wanted to see what you built," he said, his eyes taking in the gallery's transformation. "It's everything I imagined it would be." Around them, the crowd continued celebrating, oblivious to the tension crackling between them. Felt exposed under Vincent's gaze, as if he could still read her thoughts. "I know about the funding," she said quietly. Vincent's face went pale. "Emma, I can explain. $20 million, renewable annually, as long as I never find out it comes from you." Emma's laugh was bitter. "Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out?" "How long have you known?" 3 months. "I hired a forensic accountant." Emma turned away from him, pretending to study Maria Santos's largest canvas. "You manipulated my entire life, Vincent. My diary was just the beginning. I was trying to fix what I'd broken," Vincent said desperately. "I wanted you to have the career you deserved without my contamination. But you contaminated it anyway." Emma spun to face him, her voice rising. "Every exhibition I curate, every success I achieve, it's tainted by your guilt money. You've made it impossible for me to know if I succeeded on merit or because of your obsession." The words hit Vincent like physical blows. He'd thought he was setting Emma free, but instead he'd trapped her in a prison of his own making. "What do you want me to do?" he asked, his voice breaking. "I'll withdraw the funding. I'll disappear from your life completely. If you withdraw the funding, the gallery closes. Dozens of artists lose their platform, and Mrs. Chen goes back to feeling alone in empty corridors." They stood in silence, surrounded by the art Emma had brought into the world through Vincent's stolen money and guilty conscience. The irony was crushing. They'd created something beautiful together, but the foundation was poisoned. "I never meant for any of this to happen," Vincent said finally. "But it did happen." Emma's voice softened slightly. "You read my most private thoughts without permission. You used that knowledge to manipulate my life. And somehow, despite all of that, I can't hate you completely." Vincent's head snapped up, hope flickering in his storm-gray eyes. "I dream about you," Emma continued, her honesty cutting through the air like a confession. "Even knowing what you did, I dream about the man who understood my words well enough to fall in love with them. But dreams aren't reality, Vincent. You fell in love with someone who doesn't exist. You exist." Vincent stepped closer, his voice urgent. "Every word in that diary, every passion and fear and hope, it's all standing right here in front of me. You're not some fantasy I created. You're Emma Rodriguez, the woman who believes art can heal loneliness, who fights for forgotten voices, who writes with such honesty it changes people. And you're Vincent Kane, the man who violated my privacy and bought my career." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "How do we build anything real on that foundation?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment, watching the crowd appreciate art that existed because of their impossible connection. Finally, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded paper. "This is the paperwork to dissolve the anonymous trust funding the gallery," he said, holding it out to her. "Your choice, Emma. If you sign it, the money disappears. The gallery might close, but you'll know everything you achieve from now on is purely yours." Emma stared at the document, her hands shaking. "And if I don't sign it, then we'd find it. Way to live with the complicated truth of us. We admit that something beautiful came from something terrible, and we decide if that's enough to build on." The crowd around them seemed to fade as Emma considered her impossible choice. Financial independence and moral clarity. Or the man who'd seen her soul and loved it enough to sacrifice everything for her dreams? "There's a third option," she said slowly. Vincent waited, hope and terror warring in his expression. "You work for it," Emma said firmly. "You want absolution? You want a chance at something real between us? Then you earn it." every day. Starting with being the man I thought I was falling in love with in my dreams. What does that mean? Emma stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. It means you stop hiding behind money and manipulation. Show me who you really are, not who you think I want you to be. You let me choose you for real reasons, not guilty ones. Vincent's breath caught, and the gallery. The gallery stays funded, but the terms change. Full transparency, shared decision-making, and Vincent. She reached up and touched his face. Gently? No more reading my diary without permission? Despite everything, Vincent laughed. The sound was rusty, as if he'd forgotten how. I gave it back to you months ago, I know. But I want to share it with you now, the right way. If you're willing to be patient while I learn to trust you again. Vincent caught her hand against his cheek, his eyes closing as if her touch was salvation. I'll wait as long as it takes. Around them, the gallery celebration continued. Strangers connected with art that might never have seen the light without the complicated intersection of love, betrayal, and redemption that had brought Vincent and Emma together. This won't be easy, Emma warned. I don't forgive quickly, and I don't trust easily anymore. I don't deserve easy, Vincent replied. I just want real. With you. Emma looked into his eyes and saw not the billionaire who'd manipulated her life, but the man who'd fallen in love with her words and been brave enough to try earning her in person. Then let's start with real, she said, and kissed him in front of Maria Santos's painting about loneliness, transformed into connection. 1 year later, Emma stood in the same gallery for her 5th major exhibition. This time, Vincent was beside her, not as a benefactor in the shadows, but as a partner who'd earned his place through patience, honesty, and the daily choice to love her without trying to control her. Her new diary lay open on her desk at home, filled with entries about their complicated love story, and Vincent had permission to read every word. Some foundations could be rebuilt, Emma had learned. Some beautiful things could grow from broken soil. Love wasn't always pure or simple, but sometimes the complicated version was more real than anything else. Well, as the crowd celebrated another successful exhibition of forgotten voices, Emma squeezed Vincent's hand and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for letting yourself be seen," he replied. And in that moment, surrounded by art that connected strangers and love that had survived betrayal, Emma Rodriguez finally felt complete.